about now? There we go. Yeah, it seems every time Windows doesn't update or my Crisp plugin has some kind of update going on, I have to reset a bunch of stuff in OBS. So sorry about that. Yeah, so I'm not watching the Super Bowl either. See some chat going on about sports ball. Yeah, I'm not a football fan. You've heard me talk about that in the past. Why I didn't get a job at Yahoo back in the day, because I don't give a rip about football. But yeah, for those of you hanging out, hello. Good to see you. Let's see. Yeah, tonight we're just going to go through a bunch of backlog Q&A. So I'm going to be doing that for the rest of the month of February. And I was also saying while I was muted that I am going to cap it a little bit early tonight. I haven't been feeling 100%. Yeah, right? No, really. I haven't been feeling 100% lately. And so I'm going to kind of take it easy tonight. And then I'll be back at it during the week. I do have a second account. You see an automated message that just came through in the chat right here. I made another account for work where I'm going to be live streaming during the day. So if you could do me a favor and go follow Ian the Postmanaut, that would be fantastic. I'd appreciate that. It lets work know that I've got actual work going on, that I'm actually doing stuff for work. So yeah, other than that, I'm just going to double check LinkedIn and Facebook are going. Facebook's going good. So drop questions here anytime. Let's get that one going. Let me drop a comment over on LinkedIn. Looks like that one's going. Drop questions anytime, and I'll answer them on stream. Cool. All right. So there we go. I got all the recording figured out. Got everything streaming to LinkedIn and Facebook, where it wasn't working the last couple of times. But yeah, got a lot of stuff sorted out over the last couple of days. See what else is going on. New job's going great. Been there for 2 weeks. Love the team. They're all really fantastic people. And been kind of cramming my brain full of stuff about Postman. And started on some blogging. Started on putting together some talk proposals. So should be pretty fun. Looking forward to diving in on more of that this week, especially once the kids go back to school, because they had Thursday and Friday off. It's always a little weird having them home and trying to get work done while they're like in the other room over here. Can we watch a movie? And then there's the movie going on, and I've already said in the past, like I can't have like background noise with like words. Otherwise I get like locked in on that and I got to go pay attention to it. But yeah, I love just having ambient music. Kind of like what we're playing in the background right now, just, you know, kind of mellow kind of music. But anyway, yeah, so let's get through some backlog of questions. I'll be writing the questions down under my screen here in the chat as we go. But if you do have questions about interview preparation, career prep, anything along those lines, anything about getting a job in the tech industry, or even just getting a job, period. We found that when we had Chris on the show on Thursday, that a lot of the advice I was giving Chris is actually really applicable, whether it's a tech industry job or not. And so it doesn't mean I'm going to be moving away from like tech interview guide and just make like interview guide. But yeah, I do invite people, if you want to come by and ask questions that are not specific to the tech industry, I'm happy to give my thoughts and perspectives on it. Just understand it's my thoughts and perspectives. That's all it is. It's my opinions. You don't have to take it as like absolute truth, but I'm happy to offer advice and help to anybody that I can. So if you're coming over from Twitter, hello, you can send me notifications on Twitter. You can send me DMs on Twitter. I will answer those. I've got the chat up and running for Facebook and LinkedIn, so I will be kind of like looking off to the side to pay attention to those kind of as we go. But if you do have questions, you are absolutely welcome to drop those. You can drop those in comments as we go, and I will absolutely answer those kind of as we go. Looks like I've got one other person watching on LinkedIn, so hello, good to see you over there. But yeah, you can send me messages on Twitter. You can send me a direct message on Twitter. If you connect with me on LinkedIn, I'll drop my LinkedIn link over here. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can send me a direct message there. I'm always happy to take anonymous questions. Not everybody is comfortable asking questions in public and having their name on it, that kind of thing. Totally get it. So if you want to ask a question anonymously, you can absolutely do so. Just DM those over to me on LinkedIn or on Twitter, and I will pay attention to those. All right, so let's dive in. Yeah, let's dive in on some questions here. Just making sure everything else is running and everything is live. Everything's going good. Make sure the audio is muted. All right, cool. Well, let's dive in. Let's get to some questions. So like I said, I'm going to be putting the questions in the prompt right underneath here where we have the agenda. Otherwise, yeah, like, if you're hanging out in chat, please continue to chat and share your thoughts and perspectives. Otherwise, I'm just going to paraphrase some of the questions in the thing down here, and we'll get going from here. So one common theme that we have on the channel quite a lot is talking about LeetCode. And so this first question that came in said, why is LeetCode so valuable to have when it comes to job interviews and prep? I've covered this a few times in the past, and the main primary reason here is that everybody wants to be like a FAANG company. Like every other company wants to be like big and huge and popular like FAANG companies. And so when the FAANG companies started asking those weird interview questions like how many golf balls fit in a school bus, everyone else started asking those questions too, because everybody else wanted to be like the big tech companies. And then in 2009, Google published an article that said, yeah, we actually didn't get very good signals from that, so we're going to stop asking those questions. And everybody else kind of responded with, yeah, those questions are dumb, we're not going to ask them anymore either. And instead what happened is they started asking more of these like tech puzzles, I guess you'd call them, around like, here's a really interesting sort of challenge, how would you solve it with software? And that kind of gave birth to sites like LeetCode, HackerRank, and Code Wars, and others. And LeetCode quickly became, I think, one of the more popular ones, although Code Wars and HackerRank are clearly some of the more popular ones as well. So those are like the top three. And when the big tech companies started asking those kinds of questions, everybody started scrambling, wondering how they could also practice those kinds of questions. And so these sites were, suddenly, appearing, and they became very popular to go practice. Because what happened then is other companies wanted to follow suit. Other companies wanted to do what the big tech companies are doing. And because the big tech companies are asking these kinds of questions, other companies want to also ask these kinds of questions. So LeetCode is valuable in that companies are going to be asking these kinds of questions. I don't think it's going away anytime soon. I say that on the stream a lot. I don't think that style of question is going away. My biggest complaint about it, though, is that companies can get good signals from LeetCode problems, but the LeetCode problems that they choose really need to be similar to what the business does. And I've relayed this story like a bunch of times now. I should probably stop telling this story at some point. But I had an interview back in November or December with a company, and they gave me a LeetCode challenge that was absolutely completely unrelated to what they do as a business. And I spent almost as much time trying to break the problem down and solve the problem as I was trying to resolve in my head, why are they asking this kind of problem? It had to do with geolocation and finding latitude, longitude points on a grid close to another like given target point. Their company has nothing at all to do with geolocation. And so it baffled me why I was being asked this kind of question at this company when it was absolutely nothing to do with what the company does. And that's not the first time that that's happened in my career. And so I think that that's where the biggest disconnect comes with doing LeetCode style problems, is that companies choose these problems that they think are clever and really fun. And, they know the answer to it because they've gone through and they've kind of vetted, these are the questions that we're going to ask. But they don't spend a lot of time really thinking about, should we be asking this question? It's just, hey, we got an interview. We got this guy, Ian, and we want to give him an interview. So somebody quick, go find a technical challenge and go, do like a 1 hour coding interview and let us know if they did okay. And so people are just going to LeetCode and they're just pulling some random problem. And if it's one that you've already seen, then you kind of have an advantage. Or if it's similar to a problem that you've seen, then you have an advantage. But these kinds of problems aren't going away anytime soon. But last summer and last fall, we did hear that Facebook and Amazon are no longer asking dynamic programming problems. And so I think we're going to start to see a shift around what kinds of problems are being asked. I think it'll be a matter of time before other FANG companies no longer ask dynamic programming problems, and then maybe we'll see those kind of drop off because they're not as sort of favorable with the big tech companies. But we'll see how that plays out. I imagine it's going to take probably a year for that one to kind of like really spread a little bit farther. So Nathan234, good to see you in chat. Nathan says, I was leak coding recently just because of the blocks that big companies put up. Yeah, exactly. And those kinds of problems aren't going away, unfortunately. It's kind of the reality that we have in the tech industry. And I get it that in our industry, you do need to demonstrate some level of skill during the interview process. But I think if a company is going to take the time to interview you, they should be taking the time to find a technical challenge that gives them good signals about what kind of programmer you are and what sort of skill you have, but also to be close to what they do on the job. Because when it's a completely unrelated kind of problem, it's going to throw the person off. And like Nathan just said in chat, like it puts up this artificial block where if you haven't got the time to go study these things and you haven't got the time to grind on LeetCode for months and months, it puts you at a disadvantage for those jobs. And it's a form of gatekeeping, and I think it needs to stop for sure. Nathan said in chat, I got in a DoorDash though, so happy you did. I was asked what I felt was LeetCode easy. Congrats. You've been training easy and medium. Never heard of anybody asking a hard. I've heard of hard questions being asked for more senior level devs, but not for like, junior intermediate level. I'm not sure what level you're at, Nathan, but congrats. That's great. DoorDash is great. All right, let's go on to the next question here. This was kind of an interesting one to think about because I did something similar to this at a previous job. So let me just get this copied in here. Oops. Just make sure that this is going to wrap around okay. Yep. So this question asks, I had 3 interviews from the same company and internship, and every time they would ask at least one question that the previous interviewer had already asked. Why is that? I did this at a previous job, and it was part of our policy that we were looking at 4 culture values. It was being humble, being hungry, being happy, and being honest. And for us, asking the same question more than one time when it was like a technical type of question or like a tech challenge and that sort of thing, that was kind of our check for how honest you were as a person. If we asked you a question and you immediately say, hey, like so-and-so asked me that earlier today, I'd be like, oh, all right, sorry about that. Guess we drew the same questions or something like that. And we would just kind of like blow it off like no big deal. Let me just ask you these other questions. But if we knew that we were asking you a question that had already been asked and you just go ahead and answer the question and you don't allude to the fact that you were already asked that question, it kind of gave us the idea of like, oh, maybe this person's not honest because they're not speaking up about something. And for some companies, that kind of thing can feel a little sneaky, but at the same time, it does show a lot about your character when they can trust that when you ask a question that you've already been asked, or when you're being asked a question that you've already been asked during that interview session, that you'll own up to it and say, they just asked me this like an hour ago or a couple of hours ago, or, I've done this exact technical challenge in the past. Do you want me to go through it anyway? And so it can be a good check for why that sort of thing, around your character, like what kind of person are you? There are other reasons, though, why sometimes a company will ask the same question, and it can do with, maybe they didn't get a good signal from you, or maybe the interviewer, like there is legitimate reasons of, oh, I didn't realize that Ian asked that question earlier, so sorry, gave you the same question again. Some interviewers will ask the same question, maybe worded slightly differently, just to see if your answer is going to be the same. Like, how much do you really know about API development, or how much do you really know about test-driven development? Like, maybe several people on the team are going to ask similar kinds of questions to really get a feel for, like, looking at that question from a slightly different angle. Are you still going to answer it okay? So there are a handful of reasons why a company may ask the same question a few times over. Viable Clan member says in chat, that's a good one. There's another one, is to arrange one interview at 8 a.m., a second one on another day, but Friday at like 5:30 p.m. That's kind of getting into the territory of a company I wouldn't want to work with if they're scheduling like really odd hours, especially the Friday at 5:30. Like, any good recruiter is not going to do that. If a company is legit doing that, then that's probably not a company I would want to work at. I would be on the phone with them as a candidate going, sorry, I can't do Friday at 5:30. That's like, it's the end of my week. It's dinner time with my family. Like, when can we schedule another time? I just wouldn't put up with that. And 8 a.m., I've done 8 a.m. interviews. That can be a thing because of remote work and time zones and stuff like that. So 8 a.m. is not uncommon, but Friday at 5:30, that would definitely be an interview I wouldn't want to do for sure. All right, this next one kind of played off a little bit of a theme because of some things that I was sharing on the stream previously. And this question is, how can I record an online interview? Just a sec. All right, let's start this one over again. So this next question, I think came up because of some things that I've shared on the stream in the past. It said, how can I record an online interview? One of the things that I've mentioned on my stream is that when I went through this last round of interviews, I actually audio recorded all of my interviews. And the reason that I did that was for me to kind of go back and reflect on what question was I asked, how did I answer that question, how well do I think I answered that question, so that I could kind of prepare a little bit better. The next time I get asked that similar kind of question, I can refine my answer, or I could do a little more research. And as those interviews went on, I was getting better and better and better at answering those things. And so by the time, at the end of December, when I started interviewing, some of my answers were a little rough, and I was going back and listening to those again. By the time I was getting through like mid-February or mid-January to late January, my answers were so polished that suddenly I'm getting job offers like all over the place. And I ended up with half a dozen job offers. And so having a way to kind of reflect and recall on how you did in that interview is actually a really important thing if you can. But it is important that you understand the laws of where you live. In some states in the United States and in some countries, you are not legally allowed to record a conversation, even if you're part of the conversation, without letting the other person know. And so the first thing I will say about this question is you must ask permission. If you don't know the laws in your state, you have to ask permission. Here in Colorado, we are what we call a one-party state, which means only one party of the conversation needs to be aware that the conversation is being recorded. So I live in Colorado, so I have the legal right to record any kind of conversation that I have. And so I recorded all of those interviews, and I didn't tell any of the interviewers that they were being recorded. And for me, I didn't have a problem with that because I'm not sharing them. I'm not publicizing it. I'm not transcribing it to share on the internet. I'm not telling other people what questions I was asked. It was 100% for my own use and nothing else. And as soon as I'm done like picking through a bunch of them, I'm actually deleting them. I've got some data analytics and so on that I'm actually extracting. Does it matter if you never leak it? Viable Clan member asks in chat. Does it matter if you never leak it? It does, because if you get caught, like if something else happens and they find out like, oh, look at all these recordings that you have on your computer, you could be in other legal trouble. Like they could, they could bring other charges or whatever against you. If you're already in other trouble, this is just going to compound things. So you have to know the law of where you live and whether you are legally allowed to record without the other people's permission. I think that, there is some level of moral obligation that you should probably let the interviewer know that you're recording. But for me in Colorado, I didn't have to do that. And so it's for my own use. I'm going through, and like I said, as soon as I'm done with it, I'm deleting them. I've already deleted more than half of them because I've gone through and I'm extracting a bunch of questions that I was asking during the interview and extracting some of the kinds of questions that I was asked. And I'm working together like a bunch of blog series and a bunch more content to put up on the Tech Interview Guide website. And the purpose for that, like I said, was purely personal. And even what I'm going to be putting up on the website is so scrubbed. It's not going to identify anything about the company, who the interviewer was. It's not going to be the exact question or even the exact answer. It's just going to be like, hey, I was asked a theme of a question about such and such. And there's nothing wrong with that. Even if you were to sign a non-disclosure agreement with a company saying, I will not disclose anything about this interview, you can still talk at high level. Like they asked a problem about heap problems, or they asked, similar to what Nathan was saying in chat, I was asked kind of an easy level to medium level kind of leak code challenge. Those kinds of things you can talk about freely. What you can't say is, oh yeah, they asked me this question where I had to sort a deck of cards and had to extract, the fifth face card or whatever that I drew in the deck. The non-disclosure agreements are basically there to protect the company from having to go generate a whole new series of questions. They don't want to have to go through that process all the time. And so they would rather come up with a question one time and reuse that question a whole bunch. And if that question gets leaked, then they have to stop asking that question, because then people coming into future interviews are basically just gaming the process because they already know the question and they've already prepared what they consider to be a perfect answer. Zooey says in chat, leaking it is risky. I made sure I didn't push to my GitHub like any of the non-disclosure agreement code assessments. Yeah, and that's a really good sort of take on that, Zooey. If you sign a non-disclosure, like you are legally bound to not do anything, with that interview. Does that mean if you sign a non-disclosure that you're not allowed to record it? I would take a really close look at the non-disclosure agreement and find out. Like if you are legally allowed to record the interview where you live, then I would say there's probably nothing wrong with it. As long as you're not leaking it, you're not sharing it with people, like even mentors and coaches and things like that later on. Like you don't want to save, or you don't want to share that stuff with anybody else for any other reason. Sir Dizelat says in chat, I took your advice and HR took action. Sir Dizelat, remind me what that was. You're welcome. But remind me what the situation was. You took advice, HR took action. Trying to remember what this was about. Was it like a pay equity kind of thing? So he says the risk is definitely not worth the reward. I agree. When it comes to things like non-disclosure agreements and things like that, you definitely want to keep that stuff quiet for sure. It was about the certain coworker. Good. So I'm glad that's getting some resolution for you. I'm happy to hear that. All right, Viable Clan member asks in chat, what are some good tips for teams conducting internal interviews with devs wanting to join the team? So let me grab the text of that real quick and just pop that over here. So one sec. I just want to make sure that it's visible on the screen for people that are reading later on. Okay, so Viable Clan member asked in chat, what are some good tips for teams conducting internal interviews with devs wanting to join the team? So if you're already an established team within a company and other developers from within the company are applying to join your team, and you're looking for questions that you can ask for those people joining your team, did I kind of summarize that correctly? So you're looking for some good tips. Yep, okay. So I would say the number one thing to remember is the person already works there. They want to keep working there. They want to come work for your team instead. So that's already showing dedication to the team, it's dedication to the company, and it's dedication to their own career growth, that they've recognized that this is something that they want to do and that they are looking for a reason to come join your team. for reasons. You know, it could be a promotion type of role. It could be a lateral move within a company. It's not really up to you to question why they want to join that team. You can certainly ask that as part of the interview process, like, hey, why us? Like, what brings you over to our team? What interests you in what we do? I would probably ask them questions about, like, what do you know about our team already? I think, though, the number one tip I can give you is be patient with them, because they already know your company. They already know the policies, the procedures. They probably know a lot about the company culture already. So they should already have a bit of a head start. And I would say the interview doesn't need to be the full-blown type of technical interview that someone coming off the street would be expected to go through. I would simplify it immensely for somebody that already works at the company, because they're already there, they're already dedicated, and they want some kind of growth in their own career, and that's why they're joining you. I think you just need to do the barest of checks of, do they have the skill that we need for this kind of role? And if they have that skill, then make a quick decision and just bring them on the team. If they can demonstrate some of the skill, then bring them on the team. You don't need to know everything about their background. You don't need to know everything about like project history and things like that. If they can demonstrate the work, bring them on the team. So number one tip, they already work there. Number two tip, keep it short. Like they should have some sort of advantage already being an employee at the company. And that advantage being that they shouldn't have to jump through all the hoops that everybody else has to jump through. Don't give them a take-home assignment. Don't necessarily do a tech challenge unless they're coming into a role where they've never done programming before and your team does programming. Then yeah, you need them to demonstrate some amount of skill. But I would still simplify that a little bit and actually make the technical challenge like, hey, this is what we actually do on the team. And it's about ascertaining then, do they have the level of skill that we're looking for? Do I want to work with this person on the team? And then from there, like, what don't they know? What are we going to have to get them up to speed on? Do I want to work with this person on the team? Like, are they going to be a good sort of fit within our own team's culture? Because while you have a company culture, every team is going to have their own sort of inherent culture as well. And is this person going to fit in? Like, do I want to work with this person? Those would be the main things I would want to check. But I think giving them a simpler process, I think, is a good. I think it's a good thing to do as a company. It shows that you respect the time that they've already spent there and the skill that they already have, and the knowledge that they're already bringing over to your team from there. Cool. That was a great question. Thanks for asking that, Viable Clan. All right, just going to go take a quick look at LinkedIn. Nope, no new questions, no new prompts. Nothing going on over at Twitter. No new questions over at Facebook. All right, so we're good. We'll keep going. But yeah, if you're watching on Facebook or Twitter, Facebook or LinkedIn, you can definitely drop questions in there at any time. If you want your question to show up over here in this panel, you'll have to come over to Twitch. And my username is the same as LinkedIn. And Twitter, it's Ian Douglas 736. You can find me on Twitch. Or you can just search Twitch for Tech Interview Prep, and you should find the stream from there. Bible Clan says, is there anything to look out for when it comes to long-term effects of team migrations? Should I expect some teams to become unpopular and obsolete? I would say, like, unless you're a manager, it's not your concern, really. I would say, thanks, Bible Clan. I appreciate you dropping the link in there. It's not really a concern that you need to have as just somebody on the team. The main thing to look out for is, why do they want to join your team, and what is their sort of career plan? Like, do they have a plan for where they want their career to go? How does your team fit into that plan? And I would really dig into that. And then find out, like, what skill do they have? Are those the kinds of skills that you need on the team? And then can they demonstrate the skills that you need on the team? Can they demonstrate that to you? But I think that all of that is a much shorter process. Now, when it comes to other teams becoming unpopular, I mean, there are teams that are always going to hold more popularity than others, or prestige and so on, like within the company. I'm thinking like a game company, for example. If you start working at a game company as an entry level dev, you're going to have a lot more of the grunt work to do where you're like, you're not working on the cool game mechanics and you're not working on the cool graphics. You're working on like that little jar picture in the background on a table somewhere. Like you're not working on the main character's, physique or weaponry and things like that. You're doing like behind the scenes, like stuff that's never going to get noticed by, 99.99% of players ever. But it's still needed. It's still necessary within the game. And if somebody like bumps a table, that jar is going to fall off. And so maybe you're going to work on the physics, of like how does that jar tip and fall and crash and whatever. So it's not going to be anything really prestigious. And so the teams where your work does become more visible. So in a web application kind of company, it's going to be like the customer facing things or the internal facing things where like someone's actually using an interface. Those teams are just naturally going to have people gravitate towards them because people want to see the impact of their work. They want to know that what they do matters to other people. And I've certainly felt this as a backend developer in my career where because I was a backend developer and my work wasn't literally viewable in a browser, I was questioned by several CEOs of like, what do you even do here? Like, how do I know that you're actually working? It's like, well, the website works. It's like, well, yeah, but it worked before you got here. It's like, yeah, but it works faster now that I'm here. Or it's more stable, or it's more resilient, or, can handle this or that, or I added all these other features, but it wasn't something that they could tangibly see and click on and like interact with. And so to a couple of CEOs, like they actually questioned, like, what do you actually do here? And I actually had to kind of prove my worth to them of like, no, I really do work here. Like, the money that you pay me is money well spent. And so I would say there are going to be kind of those natural gravitations, I think, between teams. But that's really something that you would only have to worry about at a manager level. Like, is your team going to get unpopular because you start picking up like all the really good programmers? It's like, that's not your concern. Your concern is just keep doing your job to the best of your ability. And, people are naturally going to want to shift around their roles anyway. I think one thing that would really stand out to me as a manager is the fact that somebody wants to stay within the company and transfer to another role within the company. That means they really do care about the company, as opposed to somebody that's like, I'm kind of bored at this job. I'm just going to go find a whole new job, a whole new company. At least by staying there, you already know the people, you already know the company, you already know the culture and things like that. And so there's a lot less learning curve and it can be a more comfortable move. But it's going to be a different sort of process for everybody, and it won't necessarily be comfortable for everybody. So there's different things to kind of take into consideration there. All right, well, let's keep going with some of these other questions. Again, if you've got other questions, please drop them in chat as we go, and I'll try to answer those to the best of my ability as we go. And again, they don't necessarily have to be tech interview related. So if you're dropping by and you're wondering what this thing is about, or you followed me because I was on someone else's stream, and you're just curious about like interview preparation in general, you can absolutely ask non-tech industry related questions, and I'm happy to give my thoughts and perspectives at any time. So feel free to drop questions on those events on Facebook and LinkedIn. I am paying attention to those periodically. But yeah, I will notice Twitch more just because I've got that stuff like right in front of my face here as we work. All right. I did have an anonymous question that I put in the Discord channel. Let me go find that real quick. By the way, if you want to join us on Discord, you're welcome to do so. Let me go over to my anonymous question over there. All right, so this question had to do with something that kind of made the news recently. Said, my company's going through a big layoff. I don't know yet if my role is going to be impacted. Should I look for another job anyway? The context here is I'm closing on a new home soon in a new state and would be working remotely for the company if I stay. So let me just copy and paste all that into here because that's kind of long. I'm hoping that it'll fit in the interface. Yep. So company's going through a big layoff. I don't know yet if my role is going to be impacted. Should I look for another job anyway? And their context here is that they were looking to relocate to another state where they were buying a home, and they didn't want to like move and lose their job and suddenly they can't afford this new house that they just bought without having to go through like a lengthy job hunt and so on. In the time it took them to ask this question in tonight's stream, we found out that their job was not impacted, which is great. But this is always a really important question to kind of hear about and try to unpack a little bit of how this kind of thing could impact you. If your company is doing layoffs, you don't necessarily know that your job is being impacted. And if you've started making other plans, the company doesn't owe you anything at all as far as like, oh, you bought a house? Okay, well, we're not going to lay you off. We're going to lay Ian off instead because we know that Ian didn't just buy a house. They're not going to do that kind of thing. They're just like, we need to cut, some percentage of headcount to save money, and we're just going to cut people. And it's pretty indiscriminate most of the time as far as who they cut and why. And so if you're trying to make plans and you find out that your company is doing layoffs, or you actively see that they're doing layoffs, then you do need to kind of pay attention to what's going on. And if you hear of layoffs going on, even if you don't lose your job, you still kind of want to make the decision of, do I stay anyway, or do I start looking for another job myself? One company that I joined, they had gone through a layoff. I think they had raised some money and they were trying to work on a project, and the project fell through, and so they had to lay off a bunch of people. They raised a bunch of money, they hired a bunch of people, and then the project fell through, and so they had to lay a bunch of people back off. Well, whenever a company has a major layoff like that, a bunch of people leave anyway because they think the company is failing, or they kind of see like, oh, I just don't want to be associated with a company that's doing massive layoffs like around the holidays or things like that, because we've seen plenty of that in the news over the years of companies like doing, big giant layoffs in like the month of December. It's like right before the holidays is the worst time to lay people off from a PR point of view and company relations and things like that. But I mean, companies are in business to make money, and so they want to do what they do. So if you're trying to make plans and a company does a layoff like this, and you need to decide, do I want to stay or do I want to leave? I think it doesn't hurt to start looking for a job. What you really need to decide is it worth the hassle of going through interviews, trying to find another offer, maybe getting an offer, maybe not. Like, you certainly don't want to quit your job with the expectation that you can just go find another job tomorrow. The job market is really hot right now for developers, but it's not a guarantee. Like, my job hunt took a month. I mean, the second round of my job hunt took a month. The first round took a couple of weeks, and then I took most of December off. And then, so I really got back into like full-time interview mode in early January. And by the third week of January, I'd made a decision on a job and started that on the 31st. And so even if you're a senior level dev with a lot of experience, it can still take a while to find a job. You're not literally going to find a job tomorrow. I mean, you might, depending on your skill set and the kind of jobs that you're vying for. But I would say the decision of whether to stay or leave is a big one. And you need to think pretty hard about, what is it about the company that makes you want to leave? Is it just the fact that they did layoffs and now your friends aren't working there anymore? Or is it that they did a layoff because the company is really unstable and you would just rather have a stable job? If you're right in the midst of something major like buying a new home, that's a huge decision to make. Because what you don't want to run into is a scenario where you make a financial decision and you're sort of bound to that financial decision. Now you have no job. That's a really poor place to be. And so you don't want to, and keep in mind that if you do change your job, it's going to take several weeks to like actually start that job and then get that first paycheck from that job. So like when I started this job on the 31st, they're like, all right, cool. We get paid on the 15th and the last day of the month, but I started on the last day of the month. And so I had to wait until the 15th. I have to wait till this week to get my first paycheck. And so it's another several weeks before I get paid. And so unless you've got a good financial buffer, there could be financial implications of when you leave your job and when you start the next job, and is there a gap and things like that. So again, I can't say like avoid major, financial decisions, because you don't know if or when your company is going to do layoffs. There's no there's no magic ball that's going to tell you like, oh, I bet our company's going to like start running out of money in May, so I'm going to start looking for a new job in March. Unless you know for sure, like unless the company has been transparent with you and said, hey, we've only got money until May. If we don't like raise a round of funding or close a major deal, like we're gonna be kind of stuck financially. In which case, I'd probably be looking for another job anyway. If the company's that unstable and running out of cash, I'd probably be leaving myself. So should you be looking for another job? I would say it probably doesn't hurt to go look for another job anyway. I mean, the worst that'll happen is you get a job offer that you can turn down. I think practicing interview skills is going to be a good practice no matter what. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to take that new job. You are kind of getting that company's hopes up, though, if they make you an offer. If you're kind of like playing along, you're like, oh yeah, I totally want this job, and then they make an offer and you'll be like, JK, just kidding, don't want the job after all. It kind of leaves them hanging a little bit because you've gotten their hopes up. But I would say if you go interview and you get job offers out of it, great. You've practiced interviewing, you've practiced speaking on a technical level, and this kind of goes for non-technical jobs as well. Like you've still practiced going and doing the interview and doing the thing, and sometimes just getting the nerves out is a big help too. And I've said that as well before. If you're thinking about applying for a job to target a specific company, don't make that company your first interview, because if you're nervous and you haven't practiced, you may not do well in that interview, and now you've blown your shot at the company that you really want to work at, and you might have to wait a period of time before you can reapply. And so go find a bunch of other companies that you don't care about as much and go interview with them. If you get a job offer from them, it can speed up the process with the company that you do want to work at, and now you've also practiced your interview skills to be better at answering those questions, and hopefully you'll get that job. And if not, at least you've got other offers that you can still consider making a move if you want. So there are a handful of things to sort of consider there. So should you look for another job anyway? I would say yeah. You never know what's going to happen. Companies doing one major round of layoffs where they lay off 20% of the company or a third of the company or something like that. You don't know whether that's going to impact you or how that's going to impact you. And you want to be as prepared as you can. And I think in our industry, in the tech industry, it's relatively easy to shift jobs. It'll still take a month and a half to go interview, get that job, start that job, and get those other paychecks. But it's absolutely something that I think you could do. All right, Viable Clan member asks in chat, given a perfect organization, what quarterly meetings would each developer have? You need to break that one down a little bit more for me, Viable Clan. Not every company has the same kinds of meetings, and some companies are going to have more meetings than others, just from the natural sort of state of what the company is and what they do and what they're a part of. So it's hard to give a blanket answer to 3 meetings for continued professional development. So given a perfect organization, what kinds of quarterly meetings would each developer have for continued professional development? If you're talking internal meetings, ways of sharing information and leveling people up, hopefully that's happening on a pretty regular basis. I ran every other week lunch and learn, where just someone would get up and share a topic hey, this thing was interesting to me. I went down this rabbit hole and did this thing on a Raspberry Pi, or this new programming language was kind of neat, and so I dug into it a little bit, and I just want to kind of share it with everybody. And so it was a lot of things like that. One of them was, hey, we're all working on side projects. Where should we host these things? Do we use tools like App Engine or Netlify or Heroku? Where should we be hosting our free hosting or our free projects? That are just little side things that we're just I'm automating some stuff at home, or I'm writing some Python code to make these lights blink behind me. What should we use for that kind of thing? And so it was just a really good way to share information with each other, share our experience, and just sit down and chat and have lunch and things like that. All right, so Viable clarifies a little bit more. Beyond a lunch and learn, what structure would a dev follow to learn new things, get new certifications, and so on with the company's support? All right. Thank you for being more specific with the question. So now I can be more specific with an answer. If the company is paying for like tuition reimbursement and things like that for you to go do professional development, like to learn new skills and so on, one thing you want to clarify with your manager is this something that I can do during company time, or is this something that you expect me to do on my off time? That would be the number one question. Hopefully they give you some amount of time on your work calendar to dedicate to that. And just say, you know what, I'm going to do like Friday afternoons. Friday afternoons, I'm working towards my certification for such and such security thing. Or I'm going to go learn some new programming language and I'm going to dedicate every Tuesday morning. And that's like, don't bug Ian time. Like Ian's like going heads down on, learning this new thing. So don't bug him. And hopefully get your manager's support with that, where they can say like, yeah, don't bug Ian. Tuesday morning is his study time, whatever. So what that structure looks like is also going to vary a little bit depending on the PD and depending on responsibilities that you hold on the job and, how much time you want to spend on those kinds of things and whether the company is willing to sort of, sort of sponsor that time as part of your job. My hope is that the company was smart enough to give you that time in the first place. Therefore, the company should be giving you that time on your company calendar. And Viable Clan mentions in chat like 10% of your time sounds fair. Yeah, I mean 10% it's like half a day a week. That's kind of 10% of your time. So that's not a bad amount of time, but it should be something that you talk with your manager about. Who would manage that time, example, the learning pathway and so on. Again, it depends a little bit on what you're studying and whether there's like a set curriculum. If it's like a known certification kind of thing, they'll have curriculum that you have to follow and then like an exam or something at the end to do the certification. And so there's going to be like certain things that you're going to have to learn and read through and really study and really know. Some certifications are like proctored exams, like any of the AWS exams, the Google exams. They literally want to see like your desk area. They want you to show them your desks and your screens and things like that. So they know exactly like what's around you, that there's no possible way that you can cheat, that you're not using like an earbud kind of thing where someone's like giving you the answers, that you're not like pulling this up on another screen somewhere else and like looking up answers while you're working. You literally have a camera on you that they can watch what you're doing. Because it's meant to be like, this is a certified kind of thing. Like that's why they call it a certification. They want to know that you're doing all the right things and that you actually know this content, that you don't have to go look it up. And so it's a lot of memorization. And so that would just be one example. If you're just if you're going to go learn some new programming language or new framework and you're just taking a course on Udemy or something like that, then there's still going to be some kind of curriculum to follow. Like, let's go through all these different lessons and teach you all these things, and you just need time to practice. If it's kind of an unstructured sort of thing of like, yeah, I want to go learn some new database tool, and nobody's actually built a course for it, then yeah, you don't really have curriculum for it. You're going to have to find some sort of structure to follow in order to like make that happen. As far as managing that time, it'll really be up to you. So I think the management of that time really comes down to what are you studying? How long is it going to take? And these are questions that your manager should be asking you as well. Like, hey, I want to take every Friday afternoon and just like study on this stuff. They may say like, really, Friday afternoon? Like, you sure you're not just like kicking back and watching TV and, just taking Friday afternoons off? They're probably going to want to see some sort of progress check-in, like, show me what you're learning, and maybe that might be part of your one-on-one meeting that you have with your manager or team lead or something over time. So as far as managing that time, that's really going to be up to you and the company. As far as what are you learning, how do they want to see that progress, and if it's something that's benefiting them, then they may not care as much. But if it's something, and by that, let me explain. So I worked at one company where they're like, we'll provide an amount of budget for you to go to like a tech conference. If the tech conference is about what we do as a company, like any of our tech stack, or it's related to what we do as a company, there's no question, you can go. If it's unrelated, like, it's an insurance company and you want to go to some mobile game development conference. It's like, okay, well, I'll pay for that, but you need to come back and prepare like a little slide deck on how that made you a better developer for the company if the company's going to pay for that. So I've been at both of those kinds of companies. I've also seen companies where they're like, yeah, if you want to go to any kind of technical learning of any kind, whether or not it's related to what we do, like we'll pay X amount of dollars for you to go. And you don't have to, tell us how that made you better or how that's going to benefit the company. We know it's benefiting you. We're investing in you. That shows a lot of maturity from a company point of view. So again, it depends on the company. It depends on what you're learning, whether it's benefiting them and what their policies are and so on. So those would be good questions to ask your manager. I can only give you like kind of vague ideas based on my experience. So, like I said, tech conferences that we went to that were unrelated to the company, we had to come back and do like this lunch and learn thing where we had to give a little talk and a little slide deck on like, hey, I went to this conference. These were some of the talks that I attended. These were some of the notes that I took. Put the notes up publicly available for anyone else that wanted to read them, while they're going through and watching the videos after the fact or something like that, so that everybody could kind of learn and, kind of see how that thing was cool or how that made you better somehow. Things that, where it was like, we used Python at the company. So I went to PyCon. They're like, yeah, okay, just go to PyCon. We don't care what talks you attend. We don't care like whether you give a lightning talk. We don't care which sessions you go to. It's like, it's Python. We use Python. You're going to come back a better Python developer. So yeah, go. And there was no question. They would pay for the flight and the hotel and meals and whatever. Every company's a little bit different though. So have that conversation with your manager. When it's other PD stuff, again, where you're like taking a course or taking, like you need dedicated time to study, ask whether that's something you can do on company time. And hopefully they say yes. Cool. Let's get through maybe 2 more questions, and I'm gonna wrap up for the night. So let me go get my list of questions here. That's not the list of questions. Where'd my list of questions go? Too many windows open. There it is. This would be a good one to cover. Let me go find this. So this one hit the news recently that Stack Overflow was removing Stack Overflow jobs, and they were also removing the Stack Overview or Stack Overflow like developer overview like profile, what do they call it, like developer story or something like that. And so this question is like, why are platforms getting rid of their job posting features like Facebook jobs or Stack Overflow jobs? A lot of it, honestly, is just saturation in the market. Companies were initially doing that because they were making money off of it. If you were a company and you wanted to post a job post, they would charge you $500 or $1,000 or a couple of $1,000s in order to post that job. Or they would charge you based on the number of applications that you got or something like that. And so it was a way for those platforms to make money. They were hoping that, hey, we're popular enough that people are going to come to us and post jobs, and people that are looking for jobs, like we can give them some sort of discovery, like, hey, did you know these jobs are available in your area? And they could kind of drive people to those job pages. And over time, I think a lot of those platforms realized like, you know what, like we're not making as much money on that as we thought. And the time and the effort it takes to maintain that and have like a sales team, like try to reach out to people and convince them like, hey, you should also post our job over or post your job over on our platform for X number of dollars. Companies have a budget for those kinds of things where they're like, yeah, we really need to hire someone for this job. And so let's post it on some of these platforms. They have like a set amount of money that they want to spend. And this is part of the expense of hiring somebody, that they will go through some amount of marketing money to promote that job. But they're not going to post it on like every job board ever because there are thousands of them out there. So they may hit like some of the more major ones or more of the tech centric ones if it's a tech company, or if it's a like a tech stack specific kind of role. Like we're looking for a Python developer. So I'm not just going to post it like everywhere. I'm going to go to like a specific, like, you know, there's probably a website like pythonjobs.com or something like that. I don't know if that's actually a thing, but it probably is. And they're going to like put the job post there. They would rather pay those people money because it's a very niche kind of audience. And so it's going to make them, it's a better return on the investment. And so when platforms start shutting down their job site, it's because they realize it's hard attracting companies to like come to your site, post a job, expect to get paid. Meanwhile, you're paying salespeople to reach out to these companies, and you're paying them some kind of commission if they close a deal. And you've got all the back end process and the database and everything else that you got to build and maintain in order to have that job site there. Excuse me. You need to make things discoverable. There's a lot of work involved. And so, I think for some of these companies, like certainly like a company the size of Facebook, like it's not that they're like, oh, we can't afford to do this. It's just like, well, it's kind of eating into our bottom line a tiny bit. Where a company that's not as big, like I think of someone like Stack Overflow, like they're a decent sized company and they make pretty good revenue, but having a job site, that's literally costing them more money than it's making them, they're going to realize like, yeah, we need to close this part of the business off and just not offer that anymore, because it is time and expense of building the code, maintaining the servers, maintaining, everything, having people on call. And it's mostly the sales. Well, I shouldn't say it's mostly the salespeople, but like sales and marketing of that stuff is a big expense. And so that's why I think a lot of companies would start to shut those kinds of things down. It's a little bit different from a company like, Google deciding like, oh, we just don't want to do this product anymore, and they shut it down. But it is a little bit the same where, it's a cost savings to the company. It's like, yeah, we don't have to maintain that team. We don't have to maintain those servers. We don't have to maintain that code anymore. So there's a similar reason, when you see any company shutting down some part of their product, it's usually a cost savings kind of measure. Bible Clan member asks, how do you deal with code reviews after they are merged? So I would say if the code's already merged, it's kind of late for the code review. If it's already merged in and like ready to deploy, you're kind of late for a code review. I would say in good companies, let me qualify that a little bit more. Some companies will not let pull requests get merged from the person that opens the pull request. So like if I open a pull request, to put some code up there, I can't go in and like automatically merge that myself. I have to get at least one or two other people to code review it, sign off on it, and one of them has to merge it instead. And so it can't get merged until it's been reviewed. That's a little bit different though, process-wise for every company. Every company is going to have a different sort of way of building that sort of thing out. And so it'll vary quite a lot from company to company. If code has already been merged and you realize that it's not performing well, then yeah, you can certainly do a code review at that point. You could do like some profiling on the code, as we call it, where you're actually running like timing tests, like how long does each section of the code take to execute? If a request comes in that looks like this, how long does it take to run? And then you can kind of drill down from there, like, hey, this block of code seems to not perform very well, so let's go see who wrote that code. Let's talk to them about why they wrote it the way they did. Let's see if we can improve it. We'll make another pull request and push that out. Viable Clan member clarifies in chat, you spot bad code in master and it was approved by 2 people already. I mean, as far as that process, I mean, all you can really do is again, just raise the concern as to why you think that's bad code, and have a review discussion with the 2 people and say like, hey, you reviewed this, you okayed it, but this is why that shouldn't have gone out. Then as a team, you can kind of decide on a course of action. Like, do you fix the code? Do you patch it and push out a patch? Do you have those other people shadow others? Like, you don't want to be like super strict from a disciplinary point of view. Otherwise, they're not going to want to review anybody's code, or they're going to be like really snarky about it, or really not combative, but they might be a little overly aggressive about how they review code. So you do want to be a little bit careful about that kind of thing. But if the bad code is already out there, and let's be honest, that happens all the time. Like you'll push code and you realize like, oh, that doesn't perform the way that we'd hoped. Um, you can always go back and improve the code. I mean, that's part of the iterative sort of agile process of make a change, get some feedback, make another change. Push that out, get some feedback, and so on. And that feedback could be your own feedback, or it could be feedback from customers like, hey, you pushed that change out and now the site's really slow. Like what happened? You can definitely talk to the team about it and say, okay, well, let's go find out what happened. How did that get reviewed? How did that get released the way that it did? Because it shouldn't have. Maybe the two people that reviewed that code didn't have the level of experience to really look at that code objectively and say, this code needs to be improved before we push it. Or maybe they looked at it and said like, yeah, it's good enough, so let's just push it. Sometimes good enough is good enough. Sometimes it doesn't have to be perfect. But if it's having like a major impact or there's like a major bug or security problem, then yeah, you need to pull the code, you need to patch it. And then have some kind of what we call like a post-mortem kind of process where you review it as a team and say, hey, we found this that went out in, it got pushed. It ended up in kind of your main branch and it shouldn't have. And this is what we need to change. This is why we need to change it. And as a team, we need to be careful about letting this kind of stuff through in the future and just be really transparent about it. But be kind about it too. Like don't just, Viable Clan, that was garbage code. Why'd you do that? You don't want to, put blame on people. Like just own it as a team. You're a team that did this. The team wrote the code. The team approved the code. The team pushed the code. So the team needs to fix the code. It's not Ian wrote the code, John and Ahmed like reviewed the code and they said it was okay and now it's bad. So all three of those people get fired. Like it's never going to be that bad. But it is something definitely that you want to review as a team and talk about as a team, like how do we make this better so that this process doesn't happen again. Bible Clan is asking, does it relate to a definition of done meeting? A definition of done is really like for a particular story or for a particular sort of project or area that you're building. Like how do we know when this thing's actually finished and ready to deploy? In this case, somebody thought it was ready to deploy and it actually went out. So it really depends on like, is it code that got pushed that was just not performing well, or was it code that got released that shouldn't have been released because it wasn't what the product was supposed to be? That's all more the retrospective. And so I would do that as part of the retro process and say like, how did this code end up out there? It shouldn't have. This is, we've had other people take a look at it. This was kind of their finding. So we just, we're not pointing blame on anything. You can't really stop people from going and doing like a git blame or looking at GitHub or whatever and seeing who actually, allowed the code to go out and get deployed. But you can say like, look, as a team, we don't care who did it and why. It's just we need to fix it. So we're going to fix it, and this is how we're going to do better going forward. That's really the point of the retros is you don't want to assign blame. You just want to work as a team and say this is how we're going to make it better going forward. As far as bad programming patterns and practices, like you mentioned in chat, again, that's just an education thing that as a team, you just need to work together to educate each other and say, hey, this is why we don't do it this way. And, whether it was the person that wrote the code or the people that reviewed the code, maybe all of them need additional training. It happens. And it's not something to be like angry about or, give them some kind of disciplinary action or anything like that, unless it's a repeated thing where it happens over and over and over. It's like, all right, Bible Clan, we've told you 5 times, don't do this in your code. Then it can be a disciplinary thing. But especially if it's the first time that they've done it or even the second time they've done it, go easy on them and just remind them like, these are the standards that we hold the team to. This is what we want you to know. This is how we want you to write that code in the future. And, we don't want to see this kind of thing happen again. And, but be casual about it. Don't be super strict. Don't be disciplinary about it. Otherwise, you're just going to make people angry and upset with you. And you'll end up losing people on the team. So would you meet with the team leader only about this issue? I would start with the team lead and then go from there and just say like, hey, I spotted this code. I'm a little unsure, have them review it. And if they agree, just say like, hey, can we talk about this at retro? Hopefully at the retro, you already have kind of an open conversation anyway, where they say like, who's got issues to discuss, like what else is there to talk about? And you can say like, hey, I noticed this block of code. I talked to the team lead about it. we just want to chat real quick about like what this code is doing and why it shouldn't have gone out this way. It should have been done this way instead. But again, just be gentle about it. You know, you don't have to make like a huge big deal, and it doesn't have to be disciplinary, especially if it's, you know, juniors or intermediates writing the code. You don't want to discourage them from writing code. Even if it's a senior dev, you don't want to discourage them either, but you do need to give them honest feedback and say, this is what we saw. This is how we'd like it to be better going forward, period. That's all it needs to be. It doesn't need to be like, oh, you're an awful programmer and you shouldn't have done it that way. Just say, look, we have standards. We want everybody on the team to follow these standards. So we're just going to take a minute, just review this kind of process, or we're going to review this kind of design pattern to make sure everybody's familiar with it, because we want code to look like this on the way out going forward. And just have a very honest discussion with the team. That's all it needs to be. Cool. All right. Yeah, you're welcome. Happy to help out. So yeah, I am gonna cut off a little early tonight. Like I said, I've been a little under the weather, not feeling 100%. But I will be streaming during the day. So you may have noticed stream elements popping up from time to time. I made a second account for streaming at work called Ian the Postmanaut. And so if you could do me a favor and give that account a follow, I'll drop that Twitch in here. If you could give that account a follow as well, that would be a big help for me. You don't necessarily have to come watch unless you want to. It's just me right now just going through the Postman product and learning about it. But eventually I will be like writing code samples and like working with the Postman tool and working with other people on the stream, other DevRel from other companies. I'll be on the Thursday live stream that we do every Thursday morning later in February next week, actually. I think I'm going to be on that stream next week. A little nervous about that one. It's going to be a surprise. They're going to surprise me with something. But I'm looking forward to it. It should be fun. Great team. I've found like a really, really great team to work with. So looking forward to it. But yeah, I'm going to close down for the night. Let's go raid Chris Perillo real quick, and then we'll call it an evening from there. Thanks for dropping by. I appreciate all the questions in chat. I'm thankful that I got through a little bit of my backlog for questions. I'll be doing this the rest of the month of February. And then the first Thursday in March, I'm going to have a whole panel on here just talking about like developer relations, developer advocacy, and what that's all about, and how that role kind of plays into the tech industry and so on. Cool. So let's go raid Chris, and we'll see y'all on Thursday. All right. We'll see you over at Chris's channel.